In today's video, I'm going to be sharing with you a few quickfire tips on how to navigate your way around limitations when working with no-code tools. So without further ado, let's get into it. Hey friends, welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, my name is Connor, and on this channel I help people who cannot code build online businesses with no-code tools like Webflow, Airtable, and Zapier. So in today's video, I am going to be answering a question that I get somewhat frequently, and the question is, have you run into any significant scaling issues while building Unicorn Factory with no-code tools? What limitations should I be aware of if I want to use the same stack as you? So I recently published a video where I explained why I use Webflow, Airtable, and Zapier to build my online marketplace, and in today's video I want to talk about specific limitations that I have experienced or that others have experienced using those particular tools and how you can navigate your way around those limitations. Now, because of the variety of use cases that the Webflow, Airtable, and Zapier stack has, I won't be diving into whether or not you can build certain features with those tools. If you are, however, interested in learning a little bit more about it, I've got a few videos on this channel where I explain whether or not you can build platforms like YouTube or Fiverr inside of the Webflow, Airtable, and Zapier stack. But if you have some more specific questions, then I actually run a coaching session where I can talk you through what will be possible, what will not be possible, and I'll leave a link to my website where you can schedule your call in the description down below. So before I dive into reviewing the different limitations with Webflow, Airtable, and Zapier, do me a quick little favor. If you haven't already, please like this video. Also, if you are not subscribed to the channel and you want to learn more about setting up online businesses with these types of no-code tools, then subscribe to the channel. I make a whole bunch of content that will hopefully help you get your business up and running without having to hire developers. But with that being said, let's dive into the first tool, which is Webflow. Okay, so ever since I've started the Unicorn Factory, Webflow was actually the first tool that I started using to build the website, and ever since using it, Webflow has been very steady and hasn't caused too many issues for me personally. Now, there are a few little things that can happen as your project starts to grow, and they are mostly not limitations with the platform itself. It's oftentimes not having things like good naming conventions and then accidentally overriding classes that you are already using on different pages. Now, my recommendation with that is to just adopt good naming conventions to start off with. FinSuite recently released their client-first naming convention, so if you're starting from scratch, then I definitely recommend checking out that series to kind of get a hang of how you can name your different classes in a way that makes sure that you don't accidentally overwrite them. Now, a very common concern that people have with Webflow is the 10,000 CMS limit. Now, I've been running the Unicorn Factory for 3 years. We've had over 600 freelancers on the website. I've had a few thousand clients use the platform, and I personally have not run into the 10,000 CMS limit. I do, however, see a lot of people working on marketplaces specifically that very quickly run into that issue, and the problem is that, of course, as soon as you reach that limit, you can't build on top of it, and you have to start deleting existing CMS items. Now, the main reason why this particular limitation comes up is oftentimes because people try to store user accounts inside of Webflow when they really don't have to. So if, for example, you want to create a profile page, what people intuitively do is they create a Memberstack account, and then they create the members only page through Memberstack, which is a feature that allows you to link a specific CMS item to a user that you have inside of Memberstack, and then they use the CMS to dynamically display content for a particular user. Now, in most instances, you don't actually need to use the Webflow CMS in order to create that type of functionality. In most cases, you can actually just use Memberstack and create separate fields that you want to dynamically display inside of your user's dashboard, and that really quickly allows you to get around that 10,000 CMS limit. Now, there are some instances where you will probably still need to have a CMS collection for your users, but in most cases that is only when you want to do something like link a specific user to another collection that you might have inside of Webflow. So I'm not going to overcomplicate things. long story short, if you are going to have user profiles and you don't need to link a specific user to a different collections or items within a collection, then the best way to set that functionality up is to just create separate fields inside of Memberstack and then use Memberstack to dynamically display that content on a static page. I've got a few tutorials on this channel on how I do it, how I've done it for my analytics dashboard on the Unicorn Factory, and that will allow you to scale up way beyond 10,000 users. Overall, I must say that Webflow has been super reliable throughout the last few years of me building the Unicorn Factory, and even though there may have been some times where the designer has slowed down a bit, the best way to navigate around your designer slowing down is to actually just create a duplicate version of your project or a separate project where you can build out certain components for your platform and then just copy and paste them over from one project into the other. But now let's move on to the next tool, which is Airtable. So Airtable for me has been fantastic. I actually haven't had any issues with it whatsoever, and in fact I had to look up what kind of issues people do have with Airtable in order to have something for this particular segment. Now, from my research, I have seen that a few people are concerned about the 50,000 record limit that you have for each one of your bases. So I personally haven't had this issue. I am not even close to getting to that issue because I'm pretty strategic around how I set up my bases. But eventually I will probably get there, and while thinking about this particular problem, I came up with how I would potentially handle it. So if I did hit that limit, what I would probably do is actually just create a duplicate version of my base that has all of the existing records, and then I would go back to my original base and delete all of the records out of it. Now, the main reason why I would remove everything from the original table is because I actually have a lot of workflows connected to it. For example, Integromat, Zapier, and it's connected to specific fields within that particular table. So I would probably just see myself doing that, and that would very quickly allow me to get around that particular limitation. Other than that, Airtable has been a plus whenever you feel like there is a certain limitation that you do have to deal with. They are already shipping new features. They have really been smashing it in all departments. And one quick note that I do want to say about the record limit inside of Airtable, but also the CMS limit inside of Webflow, I think that in the future we're going to see those limits being lifted, and so those won't be issues at all. And now on to the automation tools. So I'm going to be grouping Zapier, Integromat, and Parabola together. Those are the tools that I'm using on the Unicorn Factory, and oftentimes the issues that you have with those particular tools as you scale are pretty similar. Now, the first little issue that you're going to run into is as you start to scale your platform and as you start making changes to your CMS collections, you start making changes to how your Airtable base is structured, it can cause issues with some of the existing workflows that you've got set up. So just because of the nature of the tools, making changes inside of Webflow or inside of Airtable can be quite unforgiving. Now, Zapier is probably a bit more forgiving than something like Parabola, because in Parabola you can just do a lot more advanced stuff, but you are actually tying it to specific tables and fields that you have named, meaning that if you make any changes to it whatsoever, it can really quickly break. Now, oftentimes all of these tools will let you know when your workflows have stopped working, but the best way to prevent anything from breaking in the first place is to have very nice, clean naming conventions inside of Webflow and inside of Airtable. Now, Airtable is probably more important because Airtable is responsible for triggering a lot more workflows. So what I do is I actually have a section inside of my tables that stores all of the different views that trigger workflows in either Zapier, Integromat, or Parabola. Now, obviously, making sure that you structure it when you have 3 different workflows inside of Zapier isn't really a big deal, but I can tell you right now I have about 85 different workflows that are triggered from either Airtable automations, Parabola, Integromat, Zapier. So knowing what is responsible for triggering what workflow is incredibly important, because if you accidentally make a change to a view, that will trigger that particular workflow. And if it's connected to emails or connected to creating CMS items, you can very, very quickly find yourself in a situation where something goes very, very badly. So the trick to making sure that all of your workflows stay working throughout you scaling your platform is just to make sure that everything is neat and tidy. Now, lastly, I want to dive into one particular issue that might come up with Memberstack, and this is a very specific issue that comes up with people who are trying to build two-sided marketplaces. Okay, so one thing that I see a lot of people trying to do with Memberstack, which I have also tried myself, is to create two different user types. So a very specific example of what I mean is the Unicorn Factory has the freelancer user type, and then they also have the client user type. Now, oftentimes what people think you can do is just go ahead and create a membership plan for your freelancers and a membership plan for your clients. But where the issue happens inside of Memberstack is that one particular user can't be part of two different memberships at the same time, which means that if someone signs up to be a freelancer and starts paying you a monthly recurring fee and then also wants to use your platform as a client, then what sometimes happens is they change from the freelancer plan to the client plan, which effectively cancels the monthly membership fee that they are paying you. Now, there are little hacks and tricks to use Memberstack to create a two-sided marketplace, but oftentimes I find that it is a lot easier just getting started with one particular user type, oftentimes the one that is obviously paying you the monthly recurring fee, and then potentially when you start scaling things up to look at a different platform to create something like a client dashboard. There are tools like Stacker and Softer out there that you might be able to use that will give you the type of functionality that you need, but I haven't used it myself at the moment. I've been completely fine just having one particular user type, which is the freelancers. So that is just something to keep in mind before you dive into the Memberstack world. So in short, I really haven't had any issues with Webflow, Airtable, Zapier, and Memberstack when it's come to building the Unicorn Factory and scaling up to the point where it is now. However, of course, I must also acknowledge that I do know a lot about the different tools. I know what I can do and what I can't do with it, so it's allowed me to navigate my way around those limitations a lot more strategically. Now, oftentimes I think that a lot of people have certain types of concerns that are directed at the platform, but oftentimes it actually has more to do with the approach that you take to building your online platform that makes the scaling part a lot more difficult. So I want to share with you a few little tips that help me stay on track and make sure that I am building something that I can improve on over time. So the first rule is simple scales, fancy fails. Now, I heard this quote on some YouTube channel, and I think it is very applicable to the no-code space, probably to other spaces as well. And it kind of encapsulates the main issue that I see people having building in no-code. As soon as you get to the point where you start overcomplicating things, you add really next level features, you get to the point where it's very, very hard to maintain your platform with all of that added complexity. So your best bet if you want to build something that scales is to just keep it simple. Don't overdo it with features. Just focus on the core value that you are trying to provide to your customers through your platform, and you should be fine. The second recommendation is work in smaller little batches. So instead of spending 3 months working on one particular feature, build a very simplified version of that particular feature, get it out as fast as possible and start collecting feedback on it. I started doing that especially when I started working on the freelancer dashboard, and I released something that was to some extent still quite buggy, and I just started getting a lot of feedback from the users that were using it on ways that I could improve it. And so if you make a lot of smaller little changes on top of like a basic version of what you intended to build, then you'll end up finding it a lot easier to manage, plus you'll build something that people actually find useful. And then finally, and probably the most important mindset change that I made when it came to building with no-code tools, and that is to just learn to work within the limitations of those tools. If you are constantly seeking for a solution that will give you everything that you want, you'll be looking for a very long time. But as soon as you start getting familiar with the tools and you learn what those limitations are, then you can start navigating your way around it. For example, if you are on Webflow and you then realize that you can't build user accounts with Webflow, you will start researching the solution to that problem. You'll stumble across platforms like Memberstack or Outsetter. So just shifting to a mindset where you are comfortable working within the limitations of those tools will really serve you long term. But that's it, friends. We are 14 minutes into this. I intended on this being a lot shorter than it turned out, but I feel I got everything that I wanted to say off my chest. So I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you found it valuable. I mean, of course, if you did, leave a quick little like, leave a comment. Other than that, thank you so much for sticking around for the entire video, and I'll see you back here for the next one.